Hi hamster lovers and welcome to Pancake's channel. Today I'm going to be talking all about proper hamster diets. Choosing a healthy, appropriately balanced food mix is not as easy as just going into your local pet shop and choosing the cheapest mix. Pretty much all of the hamster food mixes that you'll commonly find in pet stores will be unsuitable. This is because they often contain lots of pellets, like this one. Pellets are often made with really rubbish ingredients such as soybean hulls. These are the leftovers from soybean production. Sweeteners like molasses to entice the hamster to actually eat the mix. This isn't appropriate for dwarf and Chinese hamsters as they are prone to diabetes. They can also contain added dyes and artificial flavourings. Now you may be wondering why so many pelleted mixes are sold then. This is because they're not designed with quality in mind, but it is a cheap way to give the animal everything that they need to survive. Surviving does not mean that the hamster will be happy and thriving. You will also see in pet shops food mixes that can be fed to every species of hamster. This isn't suitable as every species of hamster has different dietary requirements. This is because their ideal diet would need to replicate their natural diet as much as possible. A common myth is that Syrian hamsters are derived from deserts. This isn't true as they favour rich, agricultural fields. This means that they have a higher tolerance to things like wheat, rye, oats and corn. However, species like the winter white dwarf hamster, the Campbell's Russian dwarf hamster, the Roborovsky dwarf hamster and the Chinese hamster are from very different habitats. Campbell's hamsters favour a more arid or semi-arid sort of habitat. This basically means they come from a place that has very little to no rain and it's too dry or barren to support vegetation. Unlike the Campbell's dwarf hamster, Roborovskys originate from the desert. Fruit doesn't grow in these sorts of climates, so naturally dwarfs would not eat fruit in the wild. Additionally, Syrians prefer a diet with less small seeds like millet, as well as more variety of cereals. Most commercial food mixes that you'd find in the pet shop would not be able to support these needs. However, you may be able to find some suitable commercial food mixes that I'll talk about later in the video. One of the most important things to remember is that hamsters are omnivores. A common myth is that they're herbivores though. This isn't true as they must have animal protein in their diet, which I'll talk about later in the video. Because hamsters are omnivores and not herbivores, they cannot digest hay. It has no nutritional value for them either. Unfortunately, lots of seed mix contains things like alfalfa hay and alfalfa meal. These are unnecessary. It's important that their food mix has high quality ingredients. Some brilliant food mixes include Getzu, Robin's Gourmet Syrian, Hamster Backen, Chubby Hamster Cheeks, and the last two great food mixes are on the screen, and as they're German I can't really pronounce them very well. Some websites that I would recommend checking out to find some really good quality food mixes are Mixorama, Rodipet, Getzu, and this German company. All of these websites have excellent food mix options. You may have also watched other videos by popular hamster care YouTubers that talk about the percentages of macronutrients that they need in their diet. That's what guaranteed analysis is. It's the percentages of protein, fat and carbohydrate in the food mix. As long as the food mix is balanced, has high quality ingredients, and is species appropriate, then you don't really need to worry about the GA. However, for the average hamster it's a good idea to have around 15 to 18% protein, 6 to 12% fat, and 10 to 15% fibre. However, it's okay if the percentages of your food mix are slightly out of this range. The next thing that's really important to talk about are insects. All hamster species eat live insects in the wild. Up to 50% of a Roborovsky hamster's diet is live insects in the wild. If you really cannot stand bugs, whether it's live or dried, then a hamster may not be for you. That's because it's unfair to deprive them of an important part of their diet just because you don't like them. Some brilliant sources of protein to include in your hamster's diet are freshwater shrimp, freshwater fish, grasshoppers and crickets whether dried or live, silkworms and mealworms. If your hamster does not like eating insects, you could try supplementing their protein with jerky. Beef jerky is generally best, however it's important to make sure it's properly cooked and not too salty. It also needs to be high quality and offered in small pieces so your hamster doesn't choke on it. It can be difficult for them to digest and is quite high in fat and salt. For this reason, it must be given as a very occasional treat in small amounts. Egg white is also excellent as long as it's cooked, unseasoned and without the yolk. Ground chicken or beef is also good as long as it's properly cooked and unseasoned. Now let's talk about giving hamsters things like fruits and vegetables. It's a good idea to feed fruits and vegetables about twice a week at minimum. You can feed them more often though. Lots of German hamster care websites say that dwarf hamsters should not be fed fruit. Quite a few also advise that they should not be fed vegetables either as it's just not necessary. However, some websites say they can have vegetables about 1 to 2 times a week. These pieces that you give them should be quite small. Syrian hamsters come from more fertile land, so they can be fed more fruit and vegetables than dwarfs. Fruits or vegetables need to be removed from the cage after 24 hours to make sure mould does not form. Instead of feeding fresh fruits and vegetables, here are some fresh plants that are much better to feed. Different types of herbs, flowers, grasses and leaves are great to feed. For example, basil in small quantities, spinach in small amounts, plantain, blackberry leaves, dill, strawberry leaves, daisies, raspberry leaves, chamomile, catgrass, cornflowers, dandelions, parsley, sunflowers, broccoli, fennel, cucumber, chard, and zucchini. Something that I haven't heard explained much in the hamster care community is why dwarf hamsters can't really have sugar, and also why hamsters, particularly dwarf hamsters, are more prone to diabetes. This is because they can't properly metabolize carbohydrates, which leads to high blood sugar levels. This can lead to hyperglycemia, which is basically having too much sugar in their bloodstream. An animal that is in a constant state of hyperglycemia is classed as diabetic. So this is why it's best not to feed your dwarf hamster any sorts of fruit or vegetables. If you're feeding a high quality, species appropriate dwarf hamster food mix, then they will be getting all of the nutrients they need from that. They most likely won't suffer from malnutrition if you don't give them vegetables. Going back to talking about their food mix, here are some things that should not be in it. Sugar, molasses and honey. These are addictive and can get sticky in their cheek pouches. Additives and colourings. Any sorts of oils. And no rye, wheat, oats, barley or corn. There should also be no animal or byproducts. You will need to make sure that any fruits or vegetables that you feed your hamster have not been sprayed with pesticides. You will also need to wash them properly with clean water. It's a really good idea to scatter their food mix around the cage so they can forage for it. They have a really good sense of smell, so you don't need to worry about them not being able to find it. Them having to search for their food provides mental stimulation as it's something that they would have to do in the wild. Dwarf hamsters should be fed about 1 tablespoon of food a day. Syrian hamsters need about 1 to 2 tablespoons per day. However, with Pancake I like to scatter feed around 2 tablespoons. Then once he's collected it all up and eaten it, then I'll give him some more. This means that I feed him every couple of days. You could try this with your hamster as this will prevent them from becoming a picky eater and choosing the highest calorie seeds. However, with a proper diet it's unlikely that they'll be a picky eater. Also, going back to talking about the insects, here are some live insects that you can feed your hamster. Silkworms, dubia roaches, mealworms, black soldier larvae, waxworms, and locusts. It's actually a myth that hamsters can be hurt by live insects as long as they're an appropriate size. Insects do not have to be crushed or killed before you give them to your hamster. Just like before you feed the insects to reptiles, you'll need to gut load the insects. This basically means before you feed the insects to your hamster, you'll need to feed the insects healthy vegetables. That way they'll be a lot more nutritionally beneficial for them. Also, all species of hamster can have tomato and bell pepper as a treat even though they are fruit. I won't be talking about how to make your own hamster food mix in this video as it's quite complicated and you'll need to do a lot of research. It would also be really expensive to get all of the individual ingredients, so I just recommend getting one of the food mixes that I mentioned in the middle of the video. I would like to give a shout out to Chubby Hamster Cheeks on Instagram for providing me with some very useful sources as well as the 5 Little Hams blog. It was extremely helpful, so thank you very much, and I hope everyone watching this video also found this information helpful. I'll link some resources and helpful articles in the description below, so please go and check them out. If you disagree with any of the information in this video, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to know your opinions. So that's the end of this week's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. Bye!